Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to be the very first person in over 3,000 years to step into the untouched tomb of a pharaoh? Imagine brushing away layers of ancient dust, holding a torch that flickers against walls painted with gods and kings, and suddenly realizing you're looking at treasures no human eyes have seen since the time of ancient Egypt. That was exactly the experience of Howard Carter, a British archaeologist. Back in 1922, deep in the Valley of the Kings, a place already legendary for being the burial ground of Egypt's greatest rulers, Carter stumbled upon a discovery that would change history forever. After years of digging with little success, he finally found a staircase hidden beneath the sand. And at the bottom, a sealed doorway. When he peered inside for the very first time, Carter saw what he later described in one of the most famous lines in archaeology. Yes, wonderful things. And he wasn't exaggerating. Inside that tomb lay Tutankhamun, often called the boy king of Egypt's 18th dynasty. He ruled for less than a decade and died at just 19 years old, but his burial chamber was astonishingly well preserved. Unlike other tombs that had been looted long ago, this one was almost completely intact. Think about it: golden thrones, jeweled daggers, chariots, statues of gods, and of course, the world-famous golden mask. It was like opening a time capsule that had been locked away for over 3 millennia. For historians, this wasn't just a treasure chest. It was a priceless window into the life, art, and beliefs of ancient Egypt. No wonder people call it one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. But with great discoveries often come great mysteries. And this tomb carried with it a story that would soon terrify the world. A story not of gold or glory, but of a deadly curse. Only weeks after the tomb was opened, rumors began to spread. Whispers in the bazaars of Cairo, stories in the British and American newspapers. Anyone who dared disturb the final resting place of the pharaoh would pay the ultimate price. They called it the Pharaoh's Curse. Now you might laugh and say, really? A curse? But let's not forget, the 1920s were a very different world. Radio was still young, cinema was silent, and newspapers were the heartbeat of public imagination. When journalists got wind of these eerie stories, they printed them in bold headlines. "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the king's peace." Suddenly, Tutankhamun's tomb wasn't just an archaeological site. It was the stage for a supernatural drama. The Western world was already fascinated by Egypt, its pyramids, its mysterious hieroglyphs, and its gods of the afterlife. And now, here was a real-life story that combined science, mystery, and a chilling warning from beyond the grave. Ask yourself this: if you were living in 1923, sitting in a cafe in London or New York, reading about strange deaths and curses in the morning paper, would you believe it? Or would you dismiss it as superstition? What made the story even more compelling was the timing. Soon after the tomb was opened, the expedition's patron, Lord Carnarvon, the man who financed the entire dig, died under unusual circumstances. The press connected the dots instantly. To them, it wasn't coincidence. It was the curse taking its first victim. And just like that, the myth of Tutankhamun's curse exploded. From Cairo to Chicago, people were hooked. Was it ancient magic, long-forgotten gods seeking revenge? Or was it simply the fevered imagination of a world hungry for mystery after the horrors of World War I? This is where the legend begins, the intersection between history and superstition, between archaeology and storytelling. Because while Carter's discovery gave us treasures beyond measure, it also opened a door to one of the most chilling and debated mysteries of the modern era. And here's the question that has haunted us ever since. Was the curse of the pharaoh real? Or was it all just a coincidence magnified by fear and the press? Stay with me, because in the next part of this story, we'll look at the strange, unexplained deaths that followed the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb, and you can decide for yourself whether this was history or something much darker. When we talk about the curse of the pharaohs, the story always seems to circle back to one man, Lord Carnarvon. Without him, the tomb of Tutankhamun might never have been discovered. He wasn't just a wealthy aristocrat funding Howard Carter's excavation. He was the beating heart of the expedition, the man who believed in Carter's vision when so many others had given up. But here's where the story takes a chilling turn. In April of 1923, just a few short months after the tomb was opened, Lord Carnarvon died, suddenly and tragically. Not from an accident on site, not from some ancient weapon or booby trap, but from something that seems almost trivial at first glance, a mosquito bite. The bite became infected, then worsened into blood poisoning, and within weeks, Carnarvon was gone. Now, you and I might shrug and say, well, medical science wasn't what it is today. Infections killed people all the time back then, and that's true. But to a world already buzzing with rumors of a curse, Carnarvon's death wasn't just sad, it was terrifying. Think about it. This was the very first high-profile death connected to the tomb, and it happened so soon after the Great Discovery. To the press, it was like handing them the opening line of a ghost story. Headlines screamed about the curse of the boy king. Readers couldn't get enough of it. People started to believe that Tutankhamun himself had reached out from beyond the grave to strike down the man who disturbed his eternal rest. And as if that weren't eerie enough, strange coincidences started to pile up. The night Carnarvon died, reports claimed that all the lights in Cairo suddenly went out. The entire city plunged into darkness at the exact moment of his passing. Was it just a power cut? Maybe. But to those who already believed in the curse, it was undeniable proof that something supernatural was at play. And here's the detail that really makes your skin crawl. Miles away, back in England, Carnarvon's beloved pet dog reportedly howled uncontrollably at that very same moment, before collapsing and dying. 2 deaths, separated by continents, happening within the same night. Now, let's pause for a second. Could these events be explained logically? Absolutely. Power outages were not unusual in Cairo during that era. Dogs die, coincidences happen, but when you put them all together, the sudden death from infection, the blackout, the dog's eerie howl, it paints a picture that's hard to ignore. And this is exactly how myths take root. Humans are natural storytellers. We look for patterns, connections, meaning in random events, especially when the backdrop is something as mysterious as ancient Egypt, with its gods of death, its afterlife rituals, and its warnings carved into stone. The curse became more than a tale. It became a lens through which people viewed every single event linked to the tomb. So here's the big question. Was Carnarvon's death truly the work of an ancient curse, or was it simply tragic coincidence? Skeptics argue that his health was already fragile. He'd been injured in a car accident years earlier, and his immune system wasn't strong. But believers will tell you this wasn't just a medical case. It was retribution. The Pharaoh had claimed his first victim. And you know what? Even if you don't buy into the supernatural explanation, you can't deny the impact this moment had on the story of Tutankhamun. Without Carnarvon's strange and sudden death, maybe the idea of a curse would have faded away. Instead, it was cemented in headlines, whispered in cafes, and retold in drawing rooms around the world. One man's death turned an archaeological discovery into a legend that still haunts us today. And this was only the beginning, because as we'll see, Carnarvon wasn't the only one whose fate would be tied to the so-called curse. Lord Carnarvon's death may have been the spark, but it wasn't the end of the story. In fact, what truly gave the curse of the Pharaoh its power was what came next, because his wasn't the only life that ended under strange circumstances. In the years following the tomb's discovery, several other figures connected to it died in ways that only seemed to add fuel to the fire. Let's start with George J. Gould I, an American millionaire and railroad executive. Gould wasn't part of Carter's team, but he visited the tomb not long after its opening. Shortly after leaving Egypt, he developed a fever, then pneumonia, and before anyone knew it, he was gone. Another wealthy man, another sudden death, and the press wasted no time linking it to the curse. And then there was Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey, a young Egyptian aristocrat with ties to the discovery. His fate was even more dramatic. He was murdered in 1923 in London by his wife. Now, was this truly connected to the tomb? Realistically, probably not. But in the eyes of a superstitious world, the Pharaoh's curse didn't need to strike with scorpions or sandstorms. It could weave its way through human lives, leaving chaos in its wake. To many, the prince's violent end felt like yet another tick mark on the curse's tally. But the most unsettling cases were those who had worked directly on the excavation itself. One of them was Arthur Mace, a skilled archaeologist who played a vital role in Carter's team. In 1928, just a few years after the tomb's opening, Mace fell gravely ill and died suddenly. His death carried extra weight because he wasn't some distant visitor. He was hands-on, inside the tomb, carefully cataloging artifacts and walking daily among the treasures of Tutankhamun. If anyone might be vulnerable to a curse, it was him. By the late 1930s, newspapers and storytellers claimed that more than 20 people linked to the tomb had died prematurely. It didn't matter if some of these deaths were from natural causes, accidents, or completely unrelated circumstances. The pattern was enough to keep the legend alive. The numbers gave the story momentum, and each new obituary seemed like more proof that the curse was real. But let's stop and think about this for a moment. Were these deaths really extraordinary? Or were they part of the normal risks of living in the early 20th century, when medicine was still limited and life expectancy was shorter? That's the logical explanation. And yet, human beings aren't always logical. You're emotional. We're drawn to mysteries, to stories that send a shiver down our spine. And this story had all the ingredients: ancient magic, sudden death, unexplained coincidences, and the allure of forbidden knowledge. Here's the fascinating part. Even those who didn't believe in the curse couldn't escape its shadow. Imagine you were part of Carter's team, working inside the tomb by lantern light. Every cough, every strange ache, every unlucky accident. You'd wonder, even just for a second, is it the curse? That seed of doubt is powerful. It turns ordinary misfortune into something legendary. And that's exactly why the idea of the curse persisted. Each new death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a story, and stories spread faster than facts. By the time the 1930s rolled around, the curse of Tutankhamun had grown from a rumor into a global myth, whispered from Cairo to New York. The truth? We may never know if the curse was real, or if it was simply coincidence wrapped in superstition. But what we do know is this: the deaths surrounding Tutankhamun's tomb gave the world a mystery that still fascinates us today. And as we'll see, while many lives ended too soon, not everyone fell victim. In fact, some of the very people who were closest to the tomb lived long, full lives, raising even more questions about whether the curse was fact or just powerful fiction.
So, was there really a curse? Or was it something else, something we can explain with science rather than superstition? Let's dig a little deeper. Scientists have long argued that what people called a curse may have had a much more natural explanation. Picture this: a tomb sealed for more than 3,000 years. Inside, no fresh air, no sunlight, no circulation. What do you think might be growing in that kind of environment? Mold, bacteria, even toxic gases. When Howard Carter and his team opened Tutankhamun's tomb, they weren't just disturbing treasures, they were disturbing an ancient ecosystem. Some researchers believe that deadly molds like Aspergillus nigra or Aspergillus flavus could have been lying dormant on the walls, on the coffins, even inside the sealed wrappings of the mummy. Inhaling those spores might trigger serious lung infections, especially for people with weak immune systems. Add in ancient bacteria or poisonous gases like formaldehyde and ammonia, and you've got a recipe for real danger. And here's something worth noting. Many of the deaths tied to the curse involved fevers, infections, and pneumonia that could easily have been caused by exposure to toxins or illness. Lord Carnarvon, for example, already had poor health before he even arrived in Egypt. Some scientists say his immune system was weak, making him especially vulnerable. In other words, it wasn't the wrath of a pharaoh, it was biology. But if it's that simple, why didn't everyone die? That's the key question. The truth is, not everyone would have been equally at risk. Some team members were young and strong, others were older or already ill, and sometimes, well, bad luck just happens. Coincidence can be a powerful trickster still. Rational explanations don't stop people from being fascinated by the idea of a curse. And in the 1920s, the media played a huge role in turning isolated tragedies into a global sensation. Remember, this was the golden age of print journalism. Every newspaper wanted headlines that would sell, and nothing sells better than mystery, danger, and a dash of the supernatural. So when Carnarvon died, reporters didn't just print the facts, they embellished them. Stories about lights going out in Cairo at the exact moment of his death spread like wildfire. Details about his dog dying back in England were retold as proof of a curse. Were these things exaggerated? Almost certainly. But that didn't matter. The public wanted to believe, and once the idea took root, the curse of the pharaohs became bigger than the tomb itself. It leaped off the front pages and into popular culture. Novels were written about it. Silent. Films dramatized it. The idea of the curse worked its way into plays, pulp magazines, and eventually into Hollywood blockbusters. Even today, you can feel its shadow in movies like The Mummy. Here's what's fascinating. Sometimes, myth is more powerful than fact. The scientific explanations mold bacteria. Poor health are reasonable, but they're not nearly as thrilling. As the thought of an ancient king reaching out from beyond the grave, people crave mystery. We love to be scared just enough to feel the thrill, but safe enough to close the book or leave the theater when it's over. So maybe the real secret isn't whether the curse was real or not. Maybe the secret is how powerfully we humans are drawn to stories that blur the line between reality and legend. In the end, the curse didn't just live in the tomb, it lived in the imagination of the world. And that's why, a century later, we're still talking about it. Because whether it was science, coincidence, or superstition, the curse of Tutankhamun has become more than a story. It's become a piece of modern mythology. By now, the legend of Tutankhamun's curse sounds chilling, doesn't it? We've heard about sudden deaths, strange coincidences, and eerie stories that gripped the world in fear. But here's the twist. What if I told you that some of the very people who should have been the prime targets of the curse not only survived but went on to live long, full lives? Let's start with the man at the very center of it all, Howard Carter. He was the lead archaeologist, the one who unlocked the tomb, walked its corridors, cataloged its treasures, and touched nearly every artifact with his own hands. If anyone were destined to fall victim to a pharaoh's wrath, surely it would have been him. Yet Carter lived on for 17 years after the tomb's opening, passing away peacefully in 1939 at the age of 6. No sudden fever, no mysterious accident, no curse. And Carter wasn't the only one. Many members of his team, from assistants to specialists, continued their work and lived long after the excavation. Some even laughed off the idea of the curse, calling it nothing more than superstition fueled by the newspapers. Their survival is a critical piece of the puzzle because it challenges the very foundation of the legend. If a curse truly hung over Tutankhamun's tomb, why didn't it strike the people who were there day after day, handling the relics, breathing in the tomb's air? This is where historians weigh in with a more balanced perspective. They argue that while some of the deaths connected to the tomb were unusual, most were perfectly explainable by natural causes. Lord Carnarvon's poor health, Arthur Mace's illness, George Gould's pneumonia, tragic, yes, but not necessarily supernatural. After all, the 1920s and 30s were a time when medicine was far less advanced. Antibiotics weren't widely available. A simple infection, which today could be treated with a prescription, could easily be fatal back then. So, here's the question. Why did the curse story grow so powerful if there were so many survivors? The answer may lie less in what happened, and more in how humans interpret what happens. We're drawn to the mysterious single unexplained death. Like Carnarvon's, captures the imagination far more than a dozen ordinary lives lived in peace. The curse wasn't built on statistics, it was built on drama. And honestly, isn't that what keeps us hooked? Think about ghost stories, urban legends, even conspiracy theories. They thrive not because they're true, but because they're compelling. They tap into our deepest fears and our endless curiosity. The curse of the pharaohs is no different. But in reality, the survival of Carter and his colleagues gives us an important reminder. Not everything wrapped in mystery is truly magical. Sometimes, the most rational explanation is also the correct one. The curse may have been nothing more than a story spun by the media, exaggerated to sell papers and thrill readers hungry for excitement in the years after World War I. And yet, where it gets interesting, myth and reality aren't always enemies. Sometimes, they work together. The curse may not have been real, but the story of the curse helped cement Tutankhamun's place in modern history. Without it, the discovery might have been remembered only by scholars. With it, the world became captivated, and the boy king became a household name. So maybe the real magic wasn't in the curse itself, but in the way it kept Tutankhamun alive in our imagination. The archaeologists may have survived, but the legend of the curse, that still lingers stronger than ever. We've walked through the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, the shocking deaths, the strange coincidences, and the survivors who seem to defy the so-called curse. And now, as we reach the end of this story, we have to ask, what's the truth? Was there really a supernatural force at work, or was the curse of the pharaoh simply the invention of human imagination? Let's be honest, when we strip away the drama, most historians agree the curse was more legend than reality. It wasn't carved into the tomb walls as Hollywood likes to show. It wasn't a spell written by Egyptian priests to strike fear into future intruders. In fact, archaeologists found no evidence of an actual curse inscribed anywhere in Tutankhamun's burial chamber. So where did it come from? The answer lies in a perfect storm of superstition and media sensationalism. In the 1920s, the world was hungry for mystery. This was the age of spiritualism, seances, and ghost stories. When Lord Carnarvon died just months after the tomb's opening, newspapers seized the opportunity. They framed it as proof of an ancient curse, weaving together half-truths and eerie coincidences into a tale too captivating to ignore. And let's face it, people loved it. The story of the curse sold papers, filled lecture halls, and fascinated the public across continents. It played directly into our fascination with the unknown. The idea that a 3,000-year-old king could still reach out from beyond the grave. That's irresistible. But while the myth of the curse may have been exaggerated, the historical significance of Tutankhamun's tomb is very real and far more valuable than any superstition. This wasn't just another excavation. It was the most complete and well-preserved royal tomb ever found in Egypt. Over 5,000 artifacts were uncovered, from golden statues to ceremonial chariots, from intricate jewelry to everyday objects like toys and board games. For the first time, historians could see not just how a pharaoh was buried, but how he lived. Think about it. Before this discovery, much of what we knew about ancient Egypt came from looted tombs and fragmented artifacts. Tutankhamun's tomb gave us an intact snapshot of a royal life frozen in time. It answered questions about burial rituals, religious beliefs, and artistic achievements. It even sparked debates about Tutankhamun's own life, his health, his lineage, even his mysterious death at 19. Without this discovery, our picture of ancient Egypt would be far less complete. And yet, ironically, it wasn't just the treasures or the scholarship that made Tutankhamun a household name, it was the curse. A legend born out of coincidence and newspaper ink has ensured that Tutankhamun is remembered more vividly than almost any other pharaoh. Ramses II may have built greater monuments, and Akhenaten may have sparked greater religious revolutions. But when people today hear the word pharaoh, most of them think of Tutankhamun, the golden mask that has become an icon around the world. So here's where myth and reality intertwine. The curse may not have been real, but its legacy shaped the way the world saw this discovery. It gave the tomb a kind of mystical aura, a story that traveled faster and farther than archaeology alone ever could. In a strange way, the myth of the curse preserved Tutankhamun's memory just as much as the treasures sealed in his tomb. Now, let's pause and reflect. What does this tell us about ourselves? Why are we so drawn to stories like this, stories that mix history with mystery, fact with legend? Perhaps it's because myths give us something facts can't. A sense of wonder. Science tells us how things happen, but myth asks us, what if? What if ancient kings still held power over the present? What if death wasn't the end, but a doorway to something larger? And maybe that's the real reason the curse of the pharaoh still captivates us a century later. It's not about whether it was true, it's about the way it makes us feel. A little uneasy, a little enchanted, a little more aware that the world still holds mysteries we can't fully explain. From a historical perspective, Tutankhamun's tomb is priceless because of the knowledge it gives us about the past. From a cultural perspective, it's priceless because of the story it left behind, a story that has inspired books, movies, museum, exhibitions, and countless imaginations. Whether you're a skeptic who sees the curse as nothing but superstition, or a believer who wonders if there might be forces we can't yet understand, one thing is undeniable. The legend has kept Tutankhamun alive in a way few ancient figures could ever dream of. His actual reign may have been short and relatively unremarkable, but thanks to the tomb, the treasures, and yes, the curse, Tutankhamun's name will echo through history forever. So maybe the curse wasn't about death after all. Maybe the real curse was immortality, the kind that binds a young pharaoh's name to the world's imagination for eternity. And that, perhaps, is the greatest irony of all. Tutankhamun may have died at 19, But through myth and history woven together, he has achieved what every pharaoh sought: eternal life,